in today's video I'm going to be looking at the best rep ranges, volume and intensity in order to maximize hypertrophy, or in other words, muscle building. First of all, I would like to talk about the importance of intensity, since most of the research absolutely emphasizes the importance of intensity in order to build muscle or strength, and I find it to be one of the most important variables as well, according to my experience. In the first research, we can see the emphasis that the author puts on intensity, saying that intensity of effort has previously been considered to be perhaps the single most influential controllable variable for enhancing muscular strength. Further on, he says that training to momentary muscular failure maximizes enrollment of muscle fibers to catalyze adaptation, and eventually this is going to lead to maximized hypertrophy, or in other words, muscle building. Looking at our next research, we can also see the emphasis being put on intensity, saying that intensity has been shown to have a significant impact on muscle hypertrophy and is arguably the most important exercise variable for stimulating muscle growth. Moving on to another research, here the author states that it is important to note that these concepts predicated on the overload principle, which states that a muscle must be taxed beyond its present capacity for growth to occur. This just basically states the same thing, that in order to grow, you will need to go to muscular failure and you will need to overachieve yourself nearly every single time. Of course, it is not just this simple, but it states that this is an essential factor for promoting gains in size and strength. Clearly, without muscular overload, results will be compromised. Further on, this study summarizes the fact that evidence presented supports previous research suggesting that it is the activation of muscle fibers that appears to stimulate muscular responses causing hypertrophy, or in other words, as I said, muscle gain. So this basically just states that the most important variable is going to be to go until muscular failure and to kind of overachieve yourself every single time when you are going to the gym. From the research discussed, there appears no substantiation of the claim that training using either light or heavy loads is better for attaining hypertrophic adaptations when training to muscular failure, meaning that it doesn't matter much what kind of repetition ranges you are using or what kind of load, as long as you are going to muscular failure. Of course, as I said before, it is not this simple, but this is going to be the main variable that you need to be looking at, and the main variable that you need to meet in order to maximize your gains. Alright guys, so this is what the research says. Now let me tell you my experience. In my experience, I started training with my father, and my father has been always telling me that the most important thing is going to be to always train to muscular failure. Of course he was using other words, but this was kind of the meaning of it. And since the first day, I've been always going to the gym, trying to overachieve, trying to do a little bit more than the last time and trying to push it to the very bitter end. I always felt like that I'm actually training hard and I'm actually training well if I'm pushing myself through my comfort zone. And I know that I am absolutely sure that this is one of the most important variables in order to maximize hypertrophy, and I find it a very important thing in order to enjoy your workout sessions too, as I've been saying this in my previous videos. Because just by going to the gym and going to muscular failure and going to basically try to overachieve and always do a little bit more than the previous time and always push yourself through your comfort zone, it's going to give you a great satisfaction and it's going to make you feel absolutely proud of yourself. So I definitely recommend going to the gym and trying to push it further and further and going to muscular failure. But of course, as you are going to see further on in this video, some studies suggest that basically you cannot go for muscular failure in every single set. You cannot go into the gym and perform 20 sets for muscular failure, because you are just going to burn out and it's just not going to be beneficial for you. So there has to be like a golden middle road that you need to follow. So make sure to go for muscular failure in a couple of sets in your workout, or in at least one set each kind of exercise, but don't overdo it. But you are going to see more evidence on this fact further on in this video. So let's jump right back into it and let's talk about rep ranges. Looking at our research, it states that in final analysis there is substantial evidence that training in a moderate repetition range is the superior method for building muscular mass. By moderate repetition range, it basically stands for 6 to 12 repetitions, and then it just states a couple of beneficial factors that training in a moderate repetition range is going to provide for you. For example, it optimizes fiber recruitment, increases hormonal response, or enhances cellular hydration. Further on, it states that working in lower rep ranges is going to be beneficial as well, but it's not to maximize muscular gains, but it's the best way in order to increase strength and the ability to use heavier weights. Moving on to our next research, it just details the three basic rep ranges, that is low 1 to 5, moderate 6 to 12, and high 15 plus, and states that moderate rep range is superior to low and high rep ranges. And the reason for this is going to be basically the same reasons how it elevates testosterone and GH levels. It also states that it is absolutely crucial to use a weight of at least 65% of 1 RM in order to promote substantial hypertrophy. And this is basically standing for 65% of 1 RM is going to be 65% of the weight that you can do only one repetition with. So let's say if you can do bench press with 100 kg for one rep and that's your max, then 65% of that 1 RM is going to be 65 kilograms. And that's the minimal weight that you should use in order to maximize hypertrophy. Going further on in this research, it just basically lists a couple of benefits that training on a moderate repetition range is going to provide for you. These are, for example, both testosterone and GH are acutely elevated to a greater degree from routines employing moderate rep ranges compared to routines employing lower repetitions. Or another benefit is going to be that it maximizes acute cellular hydration, but I don't want to go very deep into scientific stuff like this. The main thing is that both of these research states that working on a moderate repetition range is going to be superior to low or high rep ranges in order to maximize hypertrophy. Of course, you need to take it into consideration that this is still only a secondary fact, and the main factor is going to be to go to muscular failure in at least a couple of sets in your exercise. Alright guys, so the research says that the way to go is a moderate rep range from 6 to 12. In my experience, this is what has been working the best for me as well, but I find it the best to kind of mix things up a little bit. So what I'm doing usually is that I'm using low, moderate and high rep ranges as well in every single workout. I mainly focus on moderate rep ranges and I use moderate rep ranges in around 70% of my workout, but I always go for a couple of very low rep range sets and very high rep range sets too. Of course, I always increase or decrease the weight that I'm using to make sure that the intensity kind of stays the same. But I find it the most beneficial to kind of incorporate all kind of repetition ranges into your workout. It's going to make it more interesting and you are going to gain also some strength and agility as well, beside only just hypertrophy. So if your goal is only hypertrophy, then I would recommend staying in a moderate rep range. But if you want interesting and exciting workouts and if you want to gain some strength as well, then I would recommend going for a couple of low sets as well and for a couple of high repetition sets as well. And also always keep in mind that your intensity should be very high. So I always aim to go for an intensity or a weight that I can barely manage my reps with. So if I'm going for 10 repetitions, then I'm going to use a weight where at 8 repetitions I'm feeling like I can barely do anymore, and that 1 or 2 last reps are always going to be a challenge. And I think this is more important than the actual rep ranges. So this is my experience. Let's jump now back into some research and look at volume. Alright guys, the last factor we are going to be looking at is going to be volume, and volume basically stands for the total amount of sets and reps used during your training session, and it also looks at the weight used during those sets and reps. So the first study says that to maximize hypertrophy, evidence exists that volume should be progressively increased over a given periodized cycle, and this is absolutely crucial. This just basically stands for the fact that every single time you go to the gym, you should be overreaching. You should do a little bit more than the previous time. You should either do more exercises, more sets, or use higher weights during those same exercises and sets that you've been using the previous time. So it doesn't matter what you are increasing. The main thing is that you should always increase your volume. Of course, make sure to periodize this increase in volume, and for this reason I would definitely recommend to keep track of your training sessions, because this way you can always see how much you should increase, and you should always increase just a little bit and slowly build up your volume. It also is very important to ensure optimal supercompensation. The period of overreaching should be followed by a brief taper of cessation from training, meaning that you can't always keep on increasing your volume, because you are going to be overtraining yourself, and overtraining has catabolic effects on muscle tissue, meaning that if you overtrain yourself, you are not going to benefit anymore from your workouts, and you will need to cessate from training, meaning that you need to stop training. So make sure to increase your volume every single time when you go to the gym, but after a certain period of time, or when you feel like your body can't take anymore, just take it back a little bit. Start training very light for a week or two and just let your body rest, and then get back into building up your volume. Another study has been looking at volume, but the end result of this study has shown that the research considered within the present section suggests that volume of training does not show relationship to hypertrophic gains. Based on the present evidence discussed and the likelihood that most persons perform multiple exercises that activate the same muscle group, the recommendation that this study basically gives is to perform a single set of each exercise to muscular failure. And this brings us back to our first point about intensity, that intensity is going to be the main variable that you will need to be looking at in order to maximize your hypertrophic gains. So the main thing, according to this study, is going to be to make sure that you do more than one exercise, of course, for each muscle group, but to make sure that in every single exercise you have at least a single set where you are going to muscular failure, and then that can basically maximize your hypertrophic gains. So this is it, guys. I know that you've been looking for a secret volume or rep range to maximize your muscle gains, but it doesn't really exist. The main thing, as I always say, is going to be hard work, and hard work pretty much stands for intensity. So just make sure to go to the gym and give it your all, and go for muscular failure. Of course, don't overachieve. Don't go for muscular failure in every single set, as I said before, but make sure to incorporate at least a couple of sets in your workout when you really push it, when you really go past your comfort zone. So the secret, as always, is hard work. So go and keep smashing it. See you next time.